back in 2023, I went to work on a Monday, and everything was going good, but about middle of the day, I felt congested. So I called Marley and told her that I felt congested and I was going to stop and get me some cough drops. Well, that did help a little bit, but that didn't really help all that good. So I got back to work at the end of the day. Started to roll my tarp on my trailer, and I was like, whew, I got to get my breath for a minute. And it was probably about 5 or 10 minutes or so. And I felt like something wasn't right. And so anyway, I parked my truck, parked my trailer, got my pickup truck to go home, and I called Marley and I said, look, something's different. I feel like something's not right. So I told her, I'm going to stop at the after hours and see what they say. And so Marley said, well, I've been coughing too. Maybe it's just a man cold. And I guess I'll admit that I do have man colds from time to time. Not all the time, but I do have them. So, but I told her, I said, this feels different. So I go to the after hours. They take me in. They take my vitals and everything, put me in a room. Well, I wasn't in that room but for 5 minutes, and the doctor from the after hours comes in and she said, you're getting in the ambulance right now. And so I'm like, okay, what's going on? She said, well, your heart rate's 166. So she said, do you want to call anybody? And first person I thought of was, yeah, call my wife. So she calls my wife and tells her, hey, I got your husband here. His heart rate's 166, and we're going to send him in an ambulance to the hospital. So I'm waiting on the ambulance, and so they come get me. They take me over to Gordon's ER. They take me into the ER, and my nurse, she was really good, and they ended up getting my heart rate down. I don't know how much they got it down, but they got it down. But the nurse in the ER, she said, your oxygen level is going all over the place, and it's my intuition that we need to do a CAT scan. So I said, okay. So they wheeled me down for the CAT scan, come back. I probably wasn't back in my room in the ER probably 10 to 20 minutes. Doctor comes in and he says, well, and when a doctor starts with, well, you're kind of like, okay, what's going on? So he tells me that I've got AFib and that I've got an aneurysm in my aorta. And he said 1 to 2 centimeters, he said we monitor. 3 to 5, we do surgery, but yours is at 6.8. The doctor also proceeded to tell me that if I hadn't have stopped at the ER that day, or the after hours, that if I would have went home, my wife and daughter would have found me dead in the bed the next morning. And that's how close I was. So they tried to find, they were down on ambulances, so they finally found one, and they took me to Norton's in downtown Louisville. And they monitored me for a week. My heart surgeon comes in. He says, I need to know, they done a bunch of tests, and he said, I need to know what kind of valve you want. And I'm like, well, I looked at my heart surgeon and I said, well, you're the expert, you tell me. I've never done this before. So he explained the difference between a tissue valve versus a mechanical. Well, my mama didn't have mechanical, but she was on, I can't think of the name for it now, but it really scared me and I didn't want to be on it. So I told him, I said, look, I'd rather have the tissue valve, and that's where I was leaning to. So he said, well, you can keep that, all the way up until surgery, but before I put you to sleep, I need to know what you're going with. I said, okay. So he explained to me and Marley that it was going to be 5.5 hours for the surgery. And I said, okay. So Marley's thinking that it's 5.5 hours from the time I get down there to the time they get done. Well, they come and got me on a Monday morning, took me down for surgery. When I got down there, the anesthesiologist come in, did his spiel, and I told the anesthesiologist nurse, I said, when you take me back, I want to pray before you operate on me. So he said, okay. So I go in, and I'll never forget it. When they wheeled me into the surgery room, it was the whitest room I'd ever seen. They had 2 big lights over top of the table, and it probably had up 50 to 75 lights inside them lights. So the anesthesiologist nurse, she says, okay, if you want to pray, you can. I said, okay. There were people in the room, but I don't know how many. So my prayer was that the Lord's Holy Spirit and presence would be in that room, and that he would be with the doctors and they would know what to do. And there would be no complications. And the last thing I said was that, God, I know you have something big for me. I don't know what that is, but I know you're not done with me. And so I got done praying, and the nurse looked at me and she said, that was a really good prayer. And she said, are you ready? And I said, well, I'm on the table. I really don't think I know where I'm going to go now. So she said, she put that mask on me, and she said, all I need you to do is take 2 deep breaths. I take 2 deep breaths, and I'm out. I went in at 10 o'clock that morning, and it took them to almost noon to get me open. They called Marley and told them that they had me on bypass, and they never updated her till I got back to recovery. And so they did 5 procedures on me, and I didn't get to ICU till 6 o'clock that night, because when they told Marley 5.5 hours, that meant 5.5 hours after they got me open. So my surgeon told Marley before I even went, he said, I'm going to go in one time and one time only. If I see anything that needs to be fixed, I'm fixing it. I'm coming out. So I get back to recovery, or I get to ICU. I had 18 monitors watching things. My nurse, she looked like 13 years old, but she run those machines like a pro. So Marley had asked them, how long is it going to be before you wake him up? My nurse in the ICU said it'll be about 2.5 hours. So she's like, all right, I'm going to go home, take care of our daughter, and I'll be back. But do not wake him up before I get back, because when he wakes up and he sees that tube in his throat, he's going to freak out. Well, here I start to wake up. Well, here I freak out. They had to strap me down to the bed because I was freaking out. So the nurse asked me, she said, you want me to call Marley? I said, I give a big heads up, yes. She calls Marley, tells her that your husband's freaking out. I hope you're our saving grace. So Marley comes up back to the hospital. When she grabbed a hold of my hand, she said I squeezed her hand so hard I about squeezed her hand off. So they get this board out to try to help me tell them, because like I said, I still had the tube in my throat. Well, now I'm more awake. And I was getting frustrated at myself because I was trying to tell them off this board what I was trying to say, because I've got these big tubes on the side of my neck, plus I got this tube in my throat. So I get frustrated, they put it down. Now I'm wide awake, and here comes my heart surgeon. He asked the nurse, he said, "What is he doing that wide awake with that tube still in his throat?" And the nurse says, "Well, he hasn't met these parameters." My heart surgeon looks at her and says, "This guy is 6'8". He is not going to meet these parameters." So he said, "You will take it out now." So he stepped out of my room, got on his phone, and within 5 minutes or less, they were in there taking that tube out. So one of the heart surgeons that came in asked me how I was doing. And in 2 days of being in ICU, physical therapy comes in and says, "We're from physical therapy. We're going to get you up and walk around. Is that okay?" And I'm thinking, all right, but I just went through major open heart surgery, and now 2 days later, you want me to get up and walk around? So they had to watch me. I've got one monitor on a pole. They walked me around. I didn't walk very far the first day, but each day I kept getting better. And so he come in and he said, "I want you to eat. I want you to get your calories back up. You don't have to eat everything, but try to do the best you can." And they give me a spirometer, which is to try to get, because they have to deflate your lungs in order to work on your heart. So I'm having to build both of my lungs back up again. So I'm breathing on this thing, and he said, "Once you get to a certain point, then I'm gonna raise it to keep getting you better." So, okay. So my nurse that was over my medicine in the hospital, she comes in and she said, "I just want to tell you," she said, "that doctor that was just in here, he's really hard to impress, but you've really impressed him." And she said, "That's not easy to do." I said, "Okay." So I leave the hospital. Now it's time to do my post-op of my heart stuff. So I go in and see one of the heart surgeons that was working with my main heart surgeon. And I asked him, he said, "Man, you look really good. Your color looks good." And I just asked him, I said, "What kind of surgery did you do on me?" And he looks at me and he says, "Well, we did a poor man's transplant on you. We did everything but put a new heart in." And that blew me away because, I felt good. I didn't feel anything. So I get out of the hospital. I was off work for 4 months. The company that I worked for worked with me, and my CEO, I was so worried that I was going to lose my job. I'd only been there for a month and a day, and I just got my insurance to kick in before all this happened. Now, that to me was God. So he told me, he said, I had Marley call him and tell him what was going on, and he said, "You tell him that to get better, and his job will still be here when he gets back." Okay. So I'm out work for 4 months. I go back, everything's going good. 6 months later, my cardiologist, I see him, and he says, "What I want to do is I want to do a CAT scan to see if everything that they did inside you has healed up." I was already on Eliquis, which is a blood thinner, but he was going to take me off if everything in there had healed up. I said, okay. So they scheduled the CAT scan. I went in, did a CAT scan. I left the office where I did the CAT scan, and I hadn't been gone but 25 minutes. Well, my cell phone rings. It's my cardiologist. And I'm thinking, okay, this is not good, but I'm hoping for the best. So when he calls me, he tells me that he doesn't have the full results of my heart side of it yet, but radiology's called him and said they found a nodule on my lung, and it's bigger than they normally see, but it's got expectations come off and off of it. Well, what that means is that nodule is growing. So I said, okay, what is the next step? The next step is for me to do a PET scan. And I'm really nervous at this point because I don't know if it's cancer, if it's not. So on a Monday, I go do the PET scan. Well, they can't tell you anything anyway. So they said, probably by the weekend, you'll know what's going on. So, okay. So I'm waiting and I'm still working, but I told everybody to contact Marley because I don't want to be driving my semi down the road and they call and tell me it's cancer. So our daughter was at my mom's and I told Marley, I said, well, I got off early. Why don't you meet me in Corden and we'll go down and get our daughter and come home. So I'm looking for our car. Well, she shows up with her mom in her mom's car. And I'm not thinking anything about it. Well, she gets out. I meet her over there by Wendy's in Corden. And as soon as she opens the door, Marley tells me, well, we got the results. That was Thursday. And she said, it's cancer. Well, I bawled and cried because here I am. I just went through major heart surgery. Now I got lung cancer. So stage 2. So now God's lining all this up. So he lined up. My cardiologist had recommended very good lung surgeon and a very good oncologist. So I talked to my lung surgeon. He comes in and he says, okay. But in the meantime, I went seen a lung specialist where he run a tube down my throat to look at the cancer more closely to see what all he could see. So when I talked to my lung surgeon, he went through with me about what he was going to do. The cancer was still inside my lungs, so it hadn't got outside. So the plan was that he was going to take the left lower lobe of my left lung and he took up to 17 lymph nodes. So when I come out of the surgery, everything went fine. Surgery went good. So I'm in the recovery room and there's like these little, they almost look like cubicles, but they had, curtains down the side. So when the nurse brought Marley in to see me in the recovery, the nurse looks at Marley and says, well, which one's your husband? And Marley told him, she said, my husband's the one that his feet or his legs are sticking off 6 inches off that bed. And the nurse kind of laughed, of course, because really there's not a whole lot of things that fits people who are 6'8" like me. So we get that. I'm off work again for, I want to say 3 or 4 months. So I go back to work. My doctor releases me. So then I talk to my oncologist. Well, now I've got to have chemo. Radiation was never mentioned. So I started taking chemo through an IV at the Cancer Institute in downtown Louisville. I did 4 rounds of chemo. I did 2 different kinds of chemo, and which it changed everything. It changed my taste buds. I lost my hair. And when we told Rayleigh that Daddy had to have surgery again, and there's a good possibility that Daddy could lose his hair, and Rayleigh just bawled and cried. And I hated that for her because she told Marley, she said, I just don't want to know. I just don't want to not know Daddy. Well, that literally broke my heart. So when I started losing my hair, we got a trimmer and a buzz thing so that we would have her help shave my head. And that kind of helped. Of course, we got the little cousins involved too. They all had a shot at shaving Uncle Jay to them and Rayleigh Daddy to shave my head bald. So it was rough, but we made it through. So all this happened in 24. So I did 4 rounds of chemo, got to ring the bell. My daughter got to ring the bell. Marley's mom, Marley's nephew, Marley and Rayleigh were all there. The nurses come in, they rang that bell. I got to ring it, Rayleigh got to ring it, and I thought, okay, this is all. So they asked me, and I thanked them, because not only did I have good family support, but I also had good support from them, because most of them that worked on that cancer floor had either had family members or they went through it themselves, so that they could kind of help make me feel comfortable. And so with that said, they asked me, they said, is there anything that you would like to say? And I told them thank you. And I said, and no more yellow stuff, because they give me this yellow stuff. There's a nausea to help me with the chemo, that they told me that it tasted like bananas. Well, it did not taste like bananas. So I told them, I said, yes, and I'm still trying to find the nurse that told me that that yellow nasty stuff tasted like bananas, because it did not. So they all laughed about it. And so then I started immunotherapy, which was supposed to help. So I ended up doing 7 rounds. They had to keep every so often, I think every 2 weeks, I'd have to go in, get my blood drawn, see how things were going. So my oncologist says, when I got to my 7th one, he said, I want to do a PET scan, because I want to see where the cancer's at, or what's going on with it. So I went in for a PET scan. That was 1st of November. Went in for the PET scan. I went back to see my oncologist, and he asked me, he walked in the room, and I'll never forget it, because it's hard to take my oncologist. So he walks in, he asks me, how are you doing today? And I'm like, well, I just looked at him and I said, well, you tell me what the scan showed, and I'll tell you how good I'm doing. So he said, no cancer. So I'm thinking, okay, God healed me. Now all I got to do is worry about staying cancer free until I go into remission. So he said he saw a little bit of fluid, but he wasn't too worried about it. All right, so I go back to work. I'm feeling good, all that. So 1st of January, Marley and Rayleigh got sick with the flu. I tried my best to keep from getting it, but I ended up getting it. So I wasn't feeling good, so I went to after hours again, and they did a flu test. I didn't have COVID, but I did have a flu. So they give me a Z-Pack, and they give me some other medicine. Took that. Took it how I needed to take it, and it wasn't very long after that, I still couldn't get the cough to go away. Went back, I think I got some more medicine, and it just wasn't doing anything. So Marley works at a tax office during tax season, and she was at work on a Saturday. Rayleigh was home with me, and I don't know, but I honestly went into this awful cough, and then I started dry heaving real bad. So I get up, I go to the bathroom. When I got to the bathroom, I'm so thankful that Rayleigh knew what to do, because I left my phone on the couch, and as soon as I went in there, she immediately called Marley and said, Mommy, Daddy's throwing up again. I never did throw up. So she gets off work, comes home. She monitors me until about 8 o'clock. While I keep coughing. I can't hardly take a breath without coughing. So I finally told Marley, and I said, look, and she even said, if you don't feel any better, I'm taking you to the ER. I said, okay. So about, I think it was around 8 o'clock. I said, look, just take me to the ER. I'm not feeling good. So we go to the ER in Corden, and I tell them. First thing they do, because I've had my heart stuff, is they do an EKG. Well, the EKG comes back good. They want to do a chest x-ray. Well, they do a chest x-ray. I had so much fluid on my left lung that they couldn't even see my left lung. So now they want to do a CAT scan. Wheel me down for the CAT scan. They still can't see anything. So the doctor comes in and says, well, we're going to take you to Norton's. All right, so they get an ambulance, come get me. I had a lady EMT and a guy EMT. They wheel me, they come in with a stretcher, they get me on there, they wheel me out to the ambulance. When they wheel me out there, keep in mind now, I'm 6'8", so they wheel me out there, they put me in the ambulance, and both of the EMTs asked me, can you please scrunch your legs up so we can shut the door? And I told the guy in the EMT, I said, look, my wife Marley drove the truck. I said, just ask her if we've got any bungee cords in there, leave my feet hanging out, and bungee cord the doors together. Well, I thought to myself, now that's really going to be a good conversation piece, going up 64 on the way to downtown Louisville to Norton's, and my feet are hanging out. So they laughed about it. So I scrunched my legs up, and my feet are at the back door. So we get to Norton's. That was like, I got up there around 2 a.m. Well, so Monday morning, my lung surgeon comes in and says, I want to have a thoracic done. Well, what that is they put a needle in your back and they try to drain fluid off so they can see better of what they're dealing with. So I think they even did another x-ray once I got up there and another CAT scan. Well, I had so much fluid on my left lung that they said, I don't know how you're looking this good coming in here because it's caused your left lung to collapse. And my right lung was compensating for my left lung not being able to breathe very well. So they did this thoracic. They pulled 1.5 liters of my lump. So they ended up sending that off to try to get the genetics of my cancer because so then they were already working on that. So Monday, my lung surgeon comes in and says, look, I got you set up for surgery Wednesday morning at 11. I said, okay. I asked him, are we going to have to take more of my lung? He said, no, surgery's not an option. Everything's going to have to be done with chemo. I said, okay. So my night nurse come in Tuesday night and she said, I've looked at your chart. Well, they've changed your surgery from 11 to 10 a.m. I said, okay, no problem. So I go at night and here I've got this on my mind. I'm trying to get sleep, trying to rest. So the meantime, my night nurse and my day nurse were getting ready to change shifts at 7 a.m. Well, they're in there with me and I get a knock on my door. It's the nurse coming to get me for surgery. So they have to, both my nurses have to jump in and try to give and sanitize me before I ever go down to surgery. So I get down there and take my vitals again. Anesthesiologist comes in and he's like, hey, how you doing? Knows my name. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But he's like, it's all good. Gives his spiel about what they're going to do. They wheel me back there. They put me to sleep. I come out of surgery and he drained another 5 to 6 liters off my lung. So sitting out there, and the nurse who was sitting beside me, she said, well, 20 minutes, we're going to take you up to your room. Well, I was coughing, and she told me that was normal because now, since they took all that fluid off and that my lung was collapsed, I'm now having to try to get my lung back up open to expand again. So they wheel me up to my room. I'm not in the room maybe 5 minutes or less, and my left side of my chest just blows up. I mean, just swells up. My face was swollen. My left eye was almost swollen shut. So Marley's kind of going, what's going on? So she gets the nurse. So they have my lung surgeon come in. And what I guess had happened is air had got underneath my skin, and that's what caused it to blow up like that. I could literally take my hand and press on it, and it felt like bubble wrap. You could actually hear when you pushed on it that it was like bubble wrap. So I'm like, okay. So Marley's sitting there with me. Her mom and dad's there. My mom and dad's there. And they said, Marley says, babe, I really don't think you understand how funny your voice sounds. I've got to get this on recording. And I'm like, what do you mean? So all the nurses that come in and everything, they're like, listen to his voice. So I ended up, everybody that come in, I had to sing the Yellow Brick Road from Wizard of Oz because I sound like a munchkin from there. And I also had to sing the Lollipop Guild 3 or 4 times. Well, after all that, there was a nurse that was on the floor and she said, look, I've got 2 new nurses, and we've never seen this. So would it be okay if they come in and they press on it to see what it feels like? So yeah, fine. So I'm like, at this point, I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad that I'm a guinea pig and I can help your nurses learn what somebody that gets air up under their skin and it all blows up and feels like bubble wrap. I mean, so then my doctor that was over my mess in the hospital, he was like, well, he was disappointed because he's like, we're going to get through this together. But he said, I noticed that your munchkin voice is not really there anymore and it's sounding more raspy. And he said, you need to work on your Godfather voice. So the next time he come in and saw me, I said, his name was Dr. Lee. And I said, Dr. Lee, could you get me some spaghetti and meatballs? So he found it funny. And so the whole thing was, it was good that was there because it kind of helped us get through things, and it helped Marley too. So she was in there with me. That was Wednesday. She had been up there since 6 a.m. So she stayed the night with me. And I told her Wednesday night, I said, I just think we need to have a talk. And so she said, I've been feeling the same. Marley looks at me and she says, I want you to know that if you don't want to do these pills, you've been poked, prodded. If you get tired, I know where you're going. And if you get to that point where you say, I just am too tired, I don't want to do this anymore. Yes, it will be hard on me and Rayleigh, but I know where you're going. And so I felt like it was good for us to have that talk, because I felt like we needed to have that talk, because if something was to happen to me, then I didn't want, so I told her dad to come in, and I told him, I said, I love your daughter and I love you and your wife, and I appreciate everything that you've done for us. You've been there for us. And he said, I just don't know what to say. He said, but you have the worst luck of anybody. So I told him, I said, and I told Marley, I said, I'm not leaning that way, but I'm going to fight this thing as hard as I can, because I feel like that the devil's tried to take me out 3 times now. He tried to take me out with my heart, tried to take me out with my first lung cancer, and he tried to take out this last one. But after my second dealing with my lung cancer, I was at home. I put my CPAP machine on, and I know I'm kind of jumping around, but I went to bed that night, And I'd even told Marley after my heart surgery, I said, what is God really trying to show me? And Marley even then said, maybe God's not trying to show you something. Maybe he's going to use your testimony to reach people. Okay, so I didn't really think too much about it. Well, so I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden, these words started coming to me. I mean, I didn't write them down, but they were coming to me. Well, God showed me this vision of me standing up in front of a crowd of people, sharing my testimony. And what was really weird about it was the crowd of people that he showed me standing in front of was inmates. And I was a correction officer in Florida. So that was just really weird and our church has a prison ministry. So I was like, oh wow. So when I was in the hospital this last time with my lung cancer, I was telling one of my night nurses about it, that God had this vision and he showed me this stuff, and she started to cry. So she goes out of the room, brings me in some ice water, and she brought me a pocket Jesus and said, I just wanted to give you this. And I was like, oh wow. So she proceeds to tell me that there's another nurse on that floor that is very religious and she prays a lot. And would it be okay if she came and prayed with you? So I said, okay. So she comes in. She wasn't even my nurse, but I ended up having her 2 nights. But she come in, and I told her the vision that I had saw, that God showed me. And as soon as I told her, she gave me that verse in Acts 2:17. And that verse, I've read it over and over and over. But Acts 2:17 says, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And when she told me that, I was like, then I realized it took me till I was 50 years old to realize the calling that God had on my life. So I get out of the hospital, and we came to church one Sunday, and Spencer was preaching, and he put Acts 2:17 up on that big screen. And immediately I thought, okay, Lord, you're really showing me and giving me every reason to use my testimony and what you brought me through and my family through to reach somebody. And I can't say enough about the support from our community, our church, and that Thursday before Marley went home, she got a text. My wife, Marley, is a PTO president of my daughter's elementary school. And she got a text from her vice president and my daughter's kindergarten teacher that said, we are thinking about you guys, and we want to set up a GoFundMe page. So Marley immediately said, yeah, you can do that. So she left about 6 o'clock Thursday night. And I said, look, I'm going to try to get some rest. I'll FaceTime it. I FaceTimed them at about 9 o'clock. She had told me that they opened that page at 5:30 to 6 o'clock that evening. And they had almost raised $3,000 for my family. And over 90% of that money came from the school community. And I am so thankful that my daughter and my wife have been able to be an influence in that school. And so Uh, so I was like, wow. And now I think, uh, so I told my doctor that in the medicine, or that was over my medicine in the hospital, I told him about the GoFundMe page, and he said, well, you need to share that around here. So he looked it up, and my doctor that was over the medicine in the hospital, Marley checked on there, and he gave $100, donated $100 to it. And I thought, wow, God lines up everything. He lined up all my surgeons through all of this. And I told my lung surgeon and my oncologist, when they come and told me that my cancer was back, it was worse this time, and it was stage 4. I told my lung surgeon, I said, because he had a hard time telling Marley that the cancer had come back. And I told him, and Donnie was there. Donnie come in the hospital to see me, and he was there. And so I told my lung surgeon, I said, you did all you could do. And I know that you did the best you could. And I said, you were top notch, and I wouldn't want to be in anybody else's hands but you. And, you almost teared up. And I said the same thing to my oncologist. I told him, you're the top of your game. I wouldn't want to be in anybody else's hands than you two. And Donnie told me, he said, you could have sat there and looked at them and just said, if you would have done more or done something different, I wouldn't be laying here again. But you know what? God's got me. It just goes to show you how something like this can touch so many people. And that's what I hope it does. Because this is what God wants me to do. And I have to be obedient. And I know that. But I am so thankful, like I said, for our church family. All the support, my family for their support. Because I know that it'll be good. And that's what I want to see from it. And I hope that this touches somebody. Because I want you to know, if God can do this for me and bring me through all of this, He can do the same thing for you.